Tonight, I've never covered this particular subject in apologetics, but I ran across the material and I thought it would be good to share because this is something that's relatively new. So it's probably not heard much about. But anyway, archaeologists prove invasions of biblical Israel with Earth's magnetic field. Because we were talking about the Bible and evidences that the Bible was true and the things in the Bible occurred. Well, this is a new field that has just come about, and I'm not sure how new it is, of ways of dating things and seeing, dating when things happen and different locations and so on. So you'll see as we're going through, if there's something you have a question about, please ask, because this is not an easy thing to do without being real technical, and I'm not that technical with this particular subject anyway. But we're going to give it a shot, and I'm going to use more scripture than what I normally do because it helps set us up with this. And it's 1 Kings 19:15 is where I want to start. It says, "Then the Lord said to him," he's talking to Elijah here, and he says, "Then the Lord said to him, go and return by the way that you came to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you are to anoint Hazael as king over Aram. You are to anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place. Then Jehu will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Jehu. But I will leave 7,000 in Israel, every knee that has not bowed to Baal and every mouth that has not kissed him." You see I underlined Hazael. I forgot to underline it down here because that's the pertinent information you're going to see in just a minute about this particular king. Then in 2 Kings 8:7, Elisha came to Damascus. Remember, this was Elijah that he was talking to before, and his successor is Elisha. You remember after Elijah was taken up in the fiery chariot that Elisha, he dropped his mantle, and Elisha was the one that followed after him. So this is Elisha. It says, "Elisha came to Damascus while Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick. And the king was told, 'The man of God has come here.' So the king said to Hazael, 'Take a gift with you and go meet the man of God. Inquire of the Lord through him, will I recover from this sickness?'" So he's wanting to know, will I recover? Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift, 40 camel loads of all kinds of goods from Damascus. When he came and stood before him, he said, "Your son Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to ask you, will I recover from this sickness?" Elisha told him, "Go say to him, you are sure to recover, but the Lord has shown me that he is sure to die." Then Elisha stared steadily at him until Hazael was ashamed. The man of God wept, and Hazael asked, "Why is my Lord weeping?" He replied, "Because I know the evil you will do to the people of Israel. You will set their fortresses on fire. You will kill their young men with the sword. You will dash their little ones to pieces. You will rip open their pregnant women." Hazael said, "How could your servant, a mere dog, do this monstrous thing?" Now remember, he was a messenger for the king, and he was coming on behalf of the king to ask a question, and Elisha is telling him that he's going to be the one that's doing the harm to Israel. Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram." Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" He responded, "He told me you are sure to recover." The next day, Hazael took a heavy cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned instead of him. So he I guess that was as close to waterboarding as you got back then, but he basically drowned the man with a wet cloth while he was in bed. Elisha had told him, well, you'll recover from this, but that's not, you're going to die anyway. And so that's the story, and that's the setup for where I want to go next. Geomagnetic fields recorded in 21 archaeological destruction layers throughout Israel, reconstructed by Israeli researchers, have verified accounts related to the Hebrew Bible of the Egyptian, Aramean, Assyrian, and Babylonian military campaigns against the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. So they have measured these different places, these battle sites and different places, and they're using this to date certain events and what happened at a particular time and so on. And we'll get more into what it is as we go. It says findings indicate, for example, that the army of Hazael, king of Aram Damascus, was responsible for the destruction of several cities: Tel Rehob, Tel Zayat, Horvat, Tevet, in addition to Gath of the Philistines. You remember Gath is where the home of Goliath. Other geomagnetic findings show the sites in southern Judah were destroyed by the Edomites, who took advantage of the destruction of Jerusalem, and the kingdom of Judah by the Babylonians. So we have Hazael is going in and he's destroying these cities, and while he's doing that, the Edomites took advantage of that because their defenses were down, and so they went in and took over these other kingdoms. And we have these writings in the Bible of what happened, but they didn't have any way to date exactly when they were or if they actually occurred, so they've come up with this. Described as a scientific breakthrough, the effort involved 20 researchers from different countries and disciplines who accurately dated 21 destruction layers at 17 archaeological sites in Israel. Geophysics, studying the Earth's magnetic field to prove the accounts of the Hebrew Bible. So they use what this has to do with is the magnetic fields of the earth. We know the earth is like a big magnet. In fact, and here it says the researchers said geophysicists who aim at understanding the mechanisms of Earth's magnetic field track changes in this field that occurred throughout history. To this end, they used archaeological findings containing magnetic minerals that, when heated or burned, record the magnetic field at the time of the fire. Okay, so this is the short explanation that helps us get us on track. If there was a city that was destroyed, and if Jerusalem was destroyed and burned, and there was a city over in Egypt that was burned at the same time, the magnetic fields that they would have and the way they aligned would be the same in both places. So you could tell if you knew when this one was done and this had the same readings, then you knew this particular battle, this particular torching of this particular city happened at the same time that this one did over here at Jerusalem. In short, that's what we're talking about. Some of you know this, some of you don't. Earth has a force field that surrounds the atmosphere emanating from its core, which basically makes the Earth one giant magnet. Now I want you to look at the detail in this, and think about this. This is not what the particular subject is tonight, but think about it. We know that the Earth is in the perfect place where it doesn't burn up from the sun and we don't freeze to death. We just happen to be in the right place in all of the universe where life that we know can exist, where plants can grow and where we can grow and thrive and animals can grow and so on. And we as believers see that as proof that God created it and put it here, because what's the odds that that would happen? Not only that, but look at this. It says makes the earth one giant magnet. This force field is responsible for protecting against foreign solar objects and penetrating our atmosphere, Protection against solar winds, giving Earth a magnetic pull, which in turn allows for navigation with the use of a compass, the northern lights, and variations in rainfall. This magnetic force that surrounds the Earth does all of this and protects us and creates the space that we can live in. On top of the fact that we happen to be at just the right spot, at just the right time to have life on this planet and to have water and to have everything that it takes to sustain life. But on top of that, you have this. Now, this is not what we're talking about the dating, but it's a good aside. In a 2020 study, researchers reconstructed the magnetic field as it was on the 9th of Av, 586 BCE. You know, it says BCE. That's before the common error. We say BC, I use BC, before Christ, which is recognized as the Hebrew date of the destruction of the first temple and the city of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian army. And I put the Jewish calendar up here so you can kind of see, get an idea of their year, the way their year is set up, and the different festivals and so on that happens. And you can see over here where we are is the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, Yom Kippur, which I talked about this past week, and the Feast of Trumpets. All of that you see is in the fall, and then you have the spring festivals, Passover, unleavened bread and first fruits, and then 50 days later you have Pentecost. In this, and it says in here, it says in the destruction of the temple, let me back up, was the 9th of Av, 586 BC. So it would be down here. The beginning of their year, the Feast of Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah, is the beginning of their civil year. The beginning of their religious year is Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is in the spring. So they can celebrate New Year's twice a year because they have two different New Years. But anyway, that gives you an idea of where we're talking about. This was the month, so it was about July and August when Nebuchadnezzar the second came in, and in the Bible it just referred to Nebuchadnezzar. He came in and destroyed the city of Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, hauled all the implements out of the temple off to Babylon. First Chronicles, more scripture here. 36:20. He, Nebuchadnezzar II, deported those who escaped from the sword to Babylon, and they became servants to him and his sons until the rise of the Persian kingdom. This fulfilled the word of the Lord through Jeremiah, and the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the days of the desolation until 70 years were fulfilled. Okay, so with the scripture already had and what is shown here, and this is the time. So this is the occurrence that we're talking about that happened in 586 BC that they used as the time to set their clocks by, if you will, because we know when that occurred, not just from the Bible, but from other historical writings and so on of the time. We know that it was around 586. Some people say 587, but it's pretty close when you get that far back, because you're talking about, what, 2,600 years ago? That's a long time. King Nebuchadnezzar, and I'm going to give you a rundown here. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled and I hope once we get, you'll understand what I'm doing all this for. If not, I haven't done my job tonight. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled the Babylonian Empire from 605 to 562 BC. His three attacks against Jerusalem are as follows. So the last attack is the one that we're talking about. It's in 586 BC. There was three separate attacks. Nebuchadnezzar, anyway, he was Nebuchadnezzar the second. It was his grandfather, or one of the ones that was Nebuchadnezzar the first. His father was Nabopolassar, I think it is. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. It's just he was Nebuchadnezzar the second, even though it doesn't say second in the Bible because it doesn't talk about the first one. You don't need to know about the second one. So anyway, this is when he reigned, was between this period of time. 605 BC, this attack marked the start of the slow and painful end of the kingdom of Judah. If you read in the Old Testament, read 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, you read Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all those, it tells you about some of what was occurring here. That before this time, before Nebuchadnezzar came in and overthrew the kingdom of Judah, and this is his first trip, the northern kingdom, which was called Israel, had already been overtaken by the Assyrians. They'd already conquered them and taken over the northern kingdom. But this is the southern kingdom, and this is the beginning of the end for Judah. They had disobeyed God, and if you're reading through, you'll see they had a good king, then they had 2 or 3 bad kings, then they have a good king, they have 2 or 3 bad kings, and as the king went, so the nation went, and it got to a point where there was no redeeming them in the place where they were. And this is mentioned in Daniel 1:1, and also in 2 Kings 24 and Jeremiah 25. The attack was in response to Judah's king Jehoiakim, who had been a vassal of Babylon. In other words, he was basically left as a king of Judah by Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years, but he rebelled against the empire. And you can read that in 2 Kings 24. After Nebuchadnezzar overcomes Jerusalem, he takes captive the prophet Daniel and his friends. Who are his friends? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, with their Jewish names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel's Chaldean name was Belteshazzar. So it had been Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Belteshazzar, or Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel, whichever way you want to look at it. But anyway, it took captive his friends as well as all of those of noble birth. You can read that in Jeremiah 27:20. It relocates them to Babylon. He also takes as booty only some of the vessels in the temple. Now, the last time he'll take the rest of them, but he took some of them. You read about that in 2 Chronicles 36:7. Jehoiakim is allowed to remain as king. 597 BC, Jerusalem was attacked a second time, only 3 months into the reign of Judah's 18-year-old king Jehoiachin. Not Jehoiakim, but Jehoiachin. In 2 Kings 24 and in 2 Chronicles 36. The king is captured and taken as prisoner back to Babylon. The prophet Ezekiel, if you're wondering how all these books fit together, and others are also taken captivity. Ezekiel 1 tells you that. Zedekiah is installed by Nebuchadnezzar as the new puppet ruler of Judah. In other words, you're allowed to rule as the king of Judah as long as you pay attention to what I say and pay tribute to me, and you realize that I'm your boss. It's kind of like when you're reading in the New Testament, you read about King Herod. Yes, he was King Herod, but he had to answer to the emperor in Rome because he was a Roman in the Roman Empire. So he had to answer to him. Then we get to 586 BC when Nebuchadnezzar initiates his third and final attack on Jerusalem. 2 Kings 24 through 25, Jeremiah 39, 52, and 2 Chronicles 36. This time he levels the whole place. He burns it down. He destroys everything that's there. You remember what I was talking about before, when you have a place where it's burned down, you can take it, it kind of preserves the magnetic field and things about it that you can read, that you can tell where things are. So anyway, he destroyed it and destroyed the temple. All the treasures found in God's house are taken out of the land and into Babylon. Judah's king Zedekiah is captured, has his eyes gouged out, and is taken into captivity. That's not all that happened. Go back and read what happened with that. He took his children and had Zedekiah to watch as he killed each one of his children, and then he put his eyes out, so the last thing he'd ever see is his children being killed. So Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a real nice fella. But anyway, he taught him a lesson. The Akkadian cuneiform inscription reads, now this is outside of the Bible, and I wanted to put this in here so you'd see we have some other source besides the Bible to record this. It says, year 7, 597 BCE, in Kislev, the king of Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar, called out his army and marched to Hatu, the land of Syria, Israel, and Judea. He set his camp against the city of Judah, Jerusalem, and on the second Adar, I'll go back to my calendar, but anyway, he took the city, captured the king Jehoiachin. He appointed a king of his choosing there, Zedekiah, who we just read about, and this is from another writing, took heavy tribute and returned to Babylon. And he captured and destroyed all these and so on, and he appointed a king, and you read that part of it. Now, this particular man, Vaknin, here's what he says. Based on the similarity or difference in intensity and direction of the magnetic field, we can either corroborate or disprove hypotheses claiming that specific sites were burned during the same military campaign. So you remember what I said, that if they're burned at the same time along the same period, they're going to show the same tracers and the same indicators as what's here. Moreover, he says, we have constructed a variation curve of field intensity over time, which can serve as a scientific dating tool similar to radiocarbon dating method. Does any of you all remember from science class what radiocarbon dating is? Carbon-14 is radioactive. It has a half-life of about 5,700 years. So, to kind of give you an indication of how you do with radiocarbon dating, if you had something that's this big that you found, and half of it was carbon-14 and half of it was, we'll say, carbon-12, we'll know that it got to this point of decay in 5,700 years. So we can date this, what's happening around this, at 5,700 years. If it goes 3/4 of it and so on, so that's the way you date with half-lives. In other words, half of it will decay in so many years. If you had a half-life of 20 years, every 20 years, half of that would decay and change into whatever else it changed into. And this kind of dating will help them date things the way you do with radiocarbon. Now, radiocarbon dating is what they use to date the dinosaurs, and they use other things as well. But this is one of the things they use. And the thing I've always said that, well, how accurate is that when you get back to what you call 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 54 million years ago? How accurate is that? How much did it vary over that period of time? If you vary a little bit in 5 million years, you can make it 4 million years instead of 5 million years, because a little bit can change it a whole lot. One example given by the researchers is the destruction of Gath of the Philistines by Hazael. So you remember Hazael? Various dating methods have placed this event at around 830 BCE. But they are unable to verify that Hazael was also responsible for the destruction of Tel Rehov, Tel Zed, and Horvat Tevet. So they weren't sure of the other because they didn't have any writing or anything to prove it was. The new study identifying full statistical synchronization between the magnetic fields recorded at all these 4 sites at the time of destruction makes a strong case for their destruction during the same campaign. In other words, the Bible is telling what Hazael did and how he did this, and this is evidence that you can use from a scientific basis to say, yes, he did attack these areas, he did destroy these areas at this particular time, and the Bible tells us he did. So even if we didn't have this, we would know, but now you have something that can help verify that. On the other hand, the destruction level at Beit Shean that recorded a totally different magnetic field refuted the prevailing hypothesis that it too was destroyed by Hazael. So in other words, the hypothesis up until this time when they came up with this way of dating said that he destroyed all these cities at the same time, but their dating from this method said, well, that didn't necessarily happen. Said instead the magnetic dating from Bet Shean indicate that this city, along with two other sites in the north, was probably destroyed 70 to 100 years earlier. Do we have anything in the Bible that corresponds with that? The date corresponds with the military campaign of Egyptian Pharaoh Shoshek. And if you look in the Bible, it's Shishak is the way you'll see the name in there, Egyptian Pharaoh, whose campaign is described in the Hebrew Bible and in an inscription on the wall of the temple of Ammon in Karnak, Egypt, which mentions Beit Shean as one of his conquests. So here we have something in Egypt telling us about this conquest. We have the Bible telling us about this conquest. We have these people that thought these were all conquered at the same time by Hazael, but the time frame now doesn't show the same, and what the Bible said was actually true instead of what they believed. Does that make sense? We're getting somewhere. You can read it right, Shishak, and would you like to have a name like Shishak? Shishak. In 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, you can read those. If you don't know, in 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, part of it correspond together because you have the history of the kings, and then you have the chronicles of the kings of Israel and of Judah in the two books. Now I'm not going to say this guy's name because I hadn't come up with a way to say it where it doesn't sound terrible. But anyway, he added that the new dating tool is unique because it is based on geomagnetic data from sites whose exact destruction dates are known from his historical sources. In other words, they know what the date is here, so you know what the date is here because this system of dating. The point that's relevant to us is these dates that they're coming up with from their geomagnetic dating match with what the Bible says and what the Bible has said all the time. So it's another example of how the Bible, as you find it, I'm not concerned about them finding archaeological evidence that the Bible is not true, because I know it's true. Whatever they find it, it's going to wait. Either you're going to, if they say, well, now this disproves it, so well, just give it a little bit of time. You'll find out you were wrong, because I don't bet against the Bible. By combining precise historical information with advanced comprehensive archaeological research, we were able to base the magnetic method on reliably anchored chronology. In other words, we know when this happened. We have it verified from several different sources, so when we set our clock by this, in other words, if we don't do it. Dinah has a clock in her office that it sets itself. Well, this one, something's messed up with it. It won't change for daylight saving time. So until next Sunday, week from Sunday, her clock is an hour off, but it'll be right then. And when I get up there and try to set it, you get down, you watch it, and it goes all the way around, sets it right back to where it was, no matter what you do. So anyway, so what I'm getting at with all this is they use the known dates of what they know, and they set their clock, this geomagnetic clock, if you will, by these particular findings, and you can date things in the Holy Land more accurately and more closely and tell what did happen at this time, what didn't happen at this time, because you can set it by the time that you did know. You synchronize your watch, you synchronize your clock, and then in doing so, you can date all these other things. The point that's important to me is that all of this is verified in the Bible. Everything they've found yet, it corresponds with what the Bible says about it. A separate paper presenting the scientific principles of archaeomagnetic dating method is in preparation in the Journal of Geological Research. Shar, I can say his name, who led the geophysical aspects of the study, said, Earth's magnetic field is critical to our existence. Most people don't realize that without it, there would be no life on Earth, since it shields us from cosmic radiation and the solar wind. That doesn't have to do with the dating itself, but because we have that magnetic field, it protects us from. Have you ever noticed they talk about in scientific circles and other circles, they talk about asteroids, that an asteroid might hit the Earth sometime, and some people hypothesize that the dinosaurs, that's what happened to the dinosaurs, is an asteroid hit the Earth and it destroyed all the dinosaurs, and as life came back and everything, the dinosaurs are no longer here. They couldn't survive, and they talk about asteroid hitting the Earth. Have you noticed there's not any big craters all around us where asteroids have hit? We're protected from all this stuff that's flying. If you can look out in space and see all the stuff that's flying through space, sometimes you'll see a falling star, we'll call it. Why does it look like a falling star? It's just a chunk of rock. Because when it enters the atmosphere, it burns up. God set us in just the right place and protected us just in the right way. If it wasn't for that, we'd be beat to death by, none of us would have made it this far, because we've been beaten to death by all kinds of asteroids and little rocks and showers and things from the sun and so on. But God designed this earth just right so it would do these things. Shar continued, our location here in Israel is uniquely conducive to archaeomagnetic research due to the abundance of well-dated archaeological findings. Over the past decade, we have reconstructed magnetic fields recorded by hundreds of archaeological items. By combining this data with the data from Yov Vaknin's investigation of historical destruction layers, we were able to form a continuous variation curve showing rapid, sharp changes in the geomagnetic field. This is wonderful news. Doesn't it sound like wonderful news? This is wonderful news. If we just knew what he's talking about, this is wonderful news, both for archaeologists who can now use geomagnetic data to determine the age of ancient materials and for geophysicists studying the Earth's core. In other words, they have a tool now that they can measure these things that we can verify in our Bibles. We can see things in our Bibles and that we say, well, this happened during this time frame. We know it did because the Bible said it does. Well, atheists will say, how do you know it happened then? How do you know that happened at all? You say, well, now you have geomagnetic archaeology that you can use this tool to date what we knew was already there. In other words, we have another tool in science to help us prove what we knew all the time. But well, they're discovering a lot of things, but one thing we can feel confident about is the more archaeological thing. You notice that it said that says our location here in Israel is uniquely conducive to archaeomagnetic research. I'm getting tongue-tied now. Research due to the abundance of well-dated archaeological findings. Isn't it interesting that where our Bible was written about, where all of this occurred, just happened to be a place on the earth where this is easy to find this evidence and of these civilizations and the things that occurred. And we knew them all the time. Questions, comments, or concerns?